He built his empire of lies, and tonight, those lies will crumble.
The ballroom was alive with applause when the billionaire's world came crashing down. Cameras flashed as a young man stepped forward, his voice slicing through the celebration. "You believe the fake DNA test, Mr. Ashford," he said calmly, every word echoing like thunder. "You abandoned your wife and your unborn children 21 years ago." The billionaire froze, his face pale beneath the golden lights. Gasps rippled across the crowd as two more figures appeared beside the young man, his mirror image and a girl with their mother's eyes. In that moment, truth replaced power, and karma took the microphone. Before you discover what happens next, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another emotional story like this. Don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below, because this story will break your heart and heal it again before the end. Your engagement helps us keep telling powerful stories that touch lives, inspire strength, and remind us that karma always finds its way home. So, grab your seat, stay till the end, and let's uncover how one lie destroyed a family, and how destiny forced a billionaire to face the children he never knew existed. 21 years earlier, Maya Collins stood at the penthouse window, her trembling hands resting on her stomach. The city lights glittered below like 1,000 watching eyes, but all she felt was fear. Only weeks ago, she and Bennett Ashford had dreamed about baby names and nursery colors. Now his silence screamed louder than any argument. She pressed her palm to her belly, whispering to the tiny heartbeat inside, promising protection even if love had failed. Behind her, the faint echo of laughter from a family dinner replayed in her mind. The night everything still felt safe, before trust shattered under a single lie. Bennett paced across his marble office floor, jaw clenched, eyes dark with disbelief. The report from Dr. Morley opened on his desk. A DNA test claiming the baby Maya carried wasn't his. His mother's voice still echoed. "She's been lying, Bennett. I warned you she'd betray you." His world felt rigged, like the ground beneath him had cracked open. Every memory, her laughter, her tears, her touch, suddenly looked staged. Pride whispered that he'd been played, and humiliation clawed at his chest. He grabbed his keys and left before reason could speak, his heart turning cold with every step away from the truth. Eleanor Ashford watched her son storm out, satisfaction flickering behind her polished smile. She'd waited years to separate him from the woman she despised. Maya's compassion had always made her feel small, threatened. Now, with the forged DNA report folded neatly in her purse, victory tasted sweet. "Sometimes," she murmured to her reflection in the hallway mirror, "a mother must protect her son from his own heart." She poured herself a glass of champagne, the bubbles dancing like her wicked triumph. Outside, thunder rolled through the night, mocking applause for a woman whose lies would echo for decades longer than she planned. When Bennett arrived home that night, Maya was waiting with dinner and a hopeful smile. She saw the storm in his eyes before he spoke. "Whose child is it, Maya?" he demanded, his tone sharp enough to cut air. Confusion washed over her, followed by panic. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, stepping closer. He threw the document onto the table, pages trembling. Maya read the false report in disbelief. "This isn't real," she cried. "You know me." But Bennett looked past her tears. "I thought I did," he said coldly, walking away while the candles flickered out beside her. That night, Maya sat alone on the kitchen floor, clutching the fake report against her chest. The sound of rain tapped against the windows, matching her heartbeat. Every promise Bennett had ever made felt like dust now. She knew Eleanor hated her, but she never imagined she'd stoop this low. Fear burned into anger. "You can destroy my marriage," she whispered into the silence, "but not my child." The city outside glittered, as if mocking her pain. She looked toward the nursery door, unfinished, untouched, and knew her life had just divided into two worlds, before the lie and everything that came after. Days passed in silence. Bennett avoided her, moving between the office and his mother's mansion. Maya sent messages, wrote letters, begged him to meet face to face, but none reached him. Lawyers began to call. Papers arrived on thick, emotionless envelopes stamped divorce. Each word stung like betrayal carved in ink. She read every line through tears, signing because fighting meant more pain she couldn't bear. At night, she prayed the truth would find its way someday. Alone in the dim apartment, she placed her hand over her belly and whispered, "We'll make it, my loves, even if the world turns its back." Eleanor smiled as she watched the headlines appear. Ashford Air files for divorce. Her plan worked flawlessly. To her, Maya was just a stain removed from her perfect empire. She sat in her garden the next morning, sipping tea, pretending not to care that she destroyed 3 innocent lives. "He'll thank me someday," she murmured, feeding crumbs to the birds. The irony escaped her completely. Somewhere across the city, Maya folded the last of Bennett's shirts into a box and paused, her tears falling onto the fabric. She kissed one sleeve softly, whispering goodbye to the man who never trusted love. Maya left New York quietly before dawn, dragging 2 suitcases and carrying a heart heavier than her luggage. The taxi driver asked where she was headed. "Atlanta," she said softly, eyes fixed on the fading skyline. She didn't look back. Every street corner held a memory. His laughter, their first kiss, the promises that no longer meant anything. She pressed her palm against her belly again. The child kicked gently, a reminder of purpose. She smiled through tears and whispered, "You'll have a better life there, I promise." The car disappeared into the mist, taking her toward pain, survival, and rebirth. The bus station in Atlanta smelled like rain and coffee. Maya stepped out, pulling her coat tight, feeling small but determined. She rented a tiny apartment downtown with peeling wallpaper and a flickering bulb. Her savings vanished within weeks. Yet each morning she forced a smile, placing her hand on her growing belly and whispering, "We'll be okay." She found part-time work answering phones at a real estate office. No one knew her story. She liked it that way. At night, she wrote plans in a notebook, a list titled Dreams That Still Matter. Hope became her weapon against every sleepless night. One late evening, Maya returned home exhausted, her shoes soaked from the storm. She lit a candle, opened her worn notebook, and stared at the top line, "Build a life worth living." Her reflection in the cracked mirror looked older, stronger. The baby kicked again, and she smiled through tears. She whispered, "I don't know how we'll do it, but we will." The flame danced as if agreeing. For the first time in weeks, she felt peace. Not because the pain vanished, but because she refused to let it define her. That night, Maya Collins fell asleep holding faith instead of fear. Months later, Atlanta. The first few months in Atlanta tested Maya's strength in ways she never imagined. The apartment leaked when it rained, and the heater coughed more than it worked. But she endured. Every morning, she caught the bus downtown, answering phones at a small real estate office while hiding her growing belly under loose sweaters. The women there were kind but curious, never asking too much. At night, she stared at the cracked ceiling and whispered prayers over her unborn child. She didn't know how she'd survive alone, but survival was no longer a choice. It was the only promise she could keep. One evening, after her shift, Maya found herself watching houses for sale from the office window. Families walked through front yards, laughing and dreaming. Something inside her stirred, an idea she couldn't ignore. Real estate wasn't just paperwork. It was people finding homes, security, belonging. She asked her boss, Mrs. Lambert, questions about listings and contracts. The older woman smiled. "You've got an eye for it, honey," she said. "Stick around long enough. You'll learn more than phones can teach." Maya nodded, quietly determined. For the first time since New York, hope didn't feel distant. It lived in the work she was doing. When labor pains came weeks early, Maya was alone in her apartment. Her neighbors rushed her to a nearby hospital. The night blurred into cries, sweat, and prayer until the doctor whispered, "Triplets, Ms. Collins. 2 boys and a girl." She laughed through tears as she held them. "Tiny, warm, perfect. Ethan, Noah, and Sienna," she whispered, naming them softly. Each one carried a piece of her heart. Each one proof that love could survive betrayal. As dawn broke through the hospital blinds, she realized something powerful. She wasn't broken anymore. She was reborn as their mother, and that was more than enough. Raising triplets in a one-bedroom apartment turned every day into a test of endurance. Maya learned to function on 3 hours of sleep, juggling feedings, diapers, and a part-time job. She smiled even when exhaustion burned behind her eyes. When she returned home each night, she'd kiss her babies and whisper, "One day, I'll give you the world." Bills piled high, but quitting wasn't an option. The kindness of strangers, neighbors offering meals, co-workers babysitting, reminded her that grace existed. Whenever despair crept in, she looked at her children's faces and saw her purpose staring back with trust too innocent to fail. As months turned to years, Maya mastered her balance between motherhood and ambition. She saved every spare dollar, studying real estate books after midnight while the triplets slept. She took her licensing exam on her 28th birthday and passed on the first try. Mrs. Lambert hugged her tightly. "You've got grit, Maya," she said proudly. Soon, Maya began selling homes herself, small ones first, then bigger deals as her confidence grew. Her clients loved her sincerity. Behind every sale, she pictured her own dream, a real home, built from strength, not dependence. For the first time, her life started moving towards sunlight again. Ethan, Noah, and Sienna grew up surrounded by love and discipline. Maya taught them early about honesty, kindness, and hard work. "We may not have everything," she'd say, "but we have enough, and enough can grow." They did their homework at the kitchen table, while she negotiated with clients on her phone. By the time they reached middle school, Collins Properties had grown into a small but respected name. Maya's picture appeared in a local newspaper under the headline "Single Mother Builds Real Estate Dream." She framed it quietly, not for pride, but as proof that her pain had birthed something beautiful. Years later, Maya stood on the balcony of her first self-owned property, watching her children play in the yard below. The air smelled of magnolias and fresh beginnings. She often wondered if Ben had ever thought of her, or the life he threw away. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him on business magazines, his smile cold and distant. She no longer cried over his face. Instead, she used the memory as fuel, building higher every time she doubted herself. Her success was a revenge. It was recovery. And in every laughter-filled dinner with her children, she silently thanked the lie that set her free. By the time the triplets turned 16, Maya's business had expanded into luxury properties across Atlanta. She trained her children to understand everything she'd built. Ethan loved technology and handled marketing. Noah was drawn to numbers, managing records with precision. Sienna had her mother's charm, winning clients effortlessly. Together, they became her pride and strength. Their laughter filled the office after hours as they planned projects like partners. To the world, they were just a powerful family. To Maya, they were living proof that love could rise from ashes and build an empire. Her tears had built foundations no storm could destroy. But even with success, silence still lived between Maya's victories. Some nights she sat alone by her office window, staring at Atlanta's glowing skyline. The memories returned. The divorce papers, Bennett's betrayal, Eleanor's manipulation. They no longer hurt, but they still lingered like faint scars. "Maybe one day you'll see," she whispered into the night. She didn't wish for his pain anymore. She wished for truth. Her children knew she'd been hurt, but not how deeply. She promised herself that one day she'd tell them everything. But fate would do it first, in a way neither she nor Bennett could ever expect. The morning after the triplets' 21st birthday, Sienna stopped by Maya's home office to deliver coffee. As she set the mug down, she noticed a worn envelope tucked beneath a stack of old documents. Curiosity tugged. She unfolded the papers carefully. Divorce files, a sonogram image, and a threatening letter signed Eleanor Ashford. Her heartbeat raced. "Ashford," she murmured, eyes widening. That name had appeared countless times in business magazines. She grabbed her phone and called Ethan and Noah immediately. Within minutes, all three stood frozen around the desk, the truth staring back at them. Proof that their mother's silence hid everything. 21 years later, Atlanta, Sienna's voice trembled as she handed the letter to her brothers. Ethan's eyes scanned the pages in disbelief, while Noah's jaw tightened with silent rage. The truth unfolded between them. Ashford Holdings, The Billionaire headlines. The same man who'd unknowingly abandoned them before they were born. He's alive, Ethan whispered. And powerful, Sienna added quietly. Noah slammed his fist against the desk. Powerful doesn't mean innocent. They turned to look at each other, realizing their entire life had been built on their mother's strength and their father's silence. That night, 3 grown children made a silent vow to uncover everything he'd hidden. Later that evening, Maya returned from a business meeting to find her children gathered around the old documents. Their faces told her what words didn't have to. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Mom," Sienna began softly, "why didn't you tell us?" Maya sank onto the couch, her composure fading. Tears welled as she whispered, "Because I wanted you to love your life without hate." The room fell quiet. Ethan knelt beside her, his voice trembling. "You gave us love, but he deserves to know what he lost." Maya looked down, heart torn between the past she buried and truth. For hours, they listened as Maya shared her story. The betrayal, the fake DNA test, the loneliness, the strength that built their future. Noah's eyes glistened, anger burning behind them. "He chose to believe a lie," he muttered. "He doesn't deserve forgiveness." But Sienna shook her head. "He deserves to face the truth." Maya sighed deeply. "Whatever you decide to do it with dignity. Don't let pain lead your choices." Ethan nodded slowly, already planning his next steps. By the end of the night, they agreed. If destiny hadn't brought Bennett Ashford to them, they would walk into his world themselves. Days later, Ethan discovered that Ashford Holdings was expanding into Atlanta. Their new project involved a luxury housing partnership with Collins Properties. The triplets stared at the announcement in disbelief. Fate had already written their reunion. Maya sat quietly, staring at the contractor assistant had just placed on her desk. "Mom, are you going to cancel it?" Noah asked. She shook her head slowly. "No. Some truths need to be seen, not told." Her voice was steady, but her pulse raced. She knew what this meant. After 21 years of silence, she would finally have to face the man she loved. When the partnership meeting arrived, Maya stepped into Ashford Holdings' glass tower, wearing confidence like armor. The triplets followed her, dressed sharply, representing Collins Properties' next generation. The lobby buzzed with executives, cameras, and journalists. Bennett's portrait hung near the elevator. Older, colder, untouched by guilt. Maya stared at it briefly, emotions flooding her chest. "Mom," Sienna whispered. Maya straightened her shoulders. "Let's go." Inside the boardroom, Bennett entered moments later, flanked by advisors. The moment his eyes met hers, time stood still. 21 years vanished. He opened his mouth, but words failed. His world shifted, and he didn't even know why yet. Bennett's composure faltered, but pride kept him standing tall. "Ms. Collins," he greeted formally, extending a hand. Maya shook it firmly, her calmness unnerving him. "It's been a long time," she said quietly. He blinked, surprised that her voice still carried the same warmth and pain. The meeting began. Business terms flowed easily, yet tension filled the air. Across the table, Ethan, Noah, and Sienna took notes, their expressions unreadable. Bennett caught himself staring at them repeatedly, drawn by something he couldn't explain. Their eyes, their posture, something felt hauntingly familiar. He quickly looked away, unaware that his past sat across from him. As the meeting continued, Eleanor Ashford entered late, her silver hair gleaming under the lights. Maya's heart skipped. She hadn't seen that face since her life fell apart. Eleanor offered a polite smile, pretending not to know the woman she'd once destroyed. "Ms. Collins, I've heard of your remarkable company," she said smoothly. Maya smiled back coldly. "And I've heard of yours, Mrs. Ashford." The tension rippled through the room. Noah's hands clenched under the table. He recognized the name immediately from the letter they'd found. Every fiber of his being wanted to speak. But he waited. Patience would make truth louder. After the meeting, Maya walked toward the elevator alone. Bennett followed quietly, stopping just behind her. "Maya," he said softly, almost unsure of his own voice. She turned, expression calm but eyes distant. "You look stronger," he added. "I had to be," she replied. For a moment, silence said what words couldn't. He wanted to apologize, but pride sealed his lips. She smiled faintly. "Don't," she whispered. "Apologies mean nothing when they come too late." The elevator doors opened, and she stepped in, leaving him staring at the reflection of the woman he abandoned, the only woman who had ever truly loved him. That night, Bennett sat in his penthouse, unable to focus. He poured himself a drink, replaying her face in his mind. He remembered the sound of her laughter, the way she used to touch his hand during meetings. He convinced himself she betrayed him, yet one look at her had resurrected every doubt. "Could I have been wrong?" he whispered to the empty room. He opened his laptop and searched Collins' properties. When her photo appeared beside a headline reading from Heartbreak to Empire, his chest tightened. The truth was crawling toward him, but the storm hadn't even begun yet. Meanwhile, in Maya's Atlanta office, the Triplets reviewed files about Ashford Holdings' upcoming gala in New York, celebrating their partnership. "It's the perfect moment," Noah said firmly. "He'll be surrounded by cameras. He can't hide from truth." Ethan nodded while Sienna hesitated. "Mom will be there." "Are you sure?" Noah's eyes burned with conviction. He believed the lie that broke her. "It's time the world knows." Sienna sighed, torn between justice and compassion. Maya entered quietly, sensing the tension. She looked at her children and said softly, "If truth must speak, let it speak with grace." None of them realized Destiny listened. Weeks later, New York City, the Manhattan skyline shimmered beneath the sunset as guests flooded into Grand Royale Hotel for the highly anticipated Ashford Collins Partnership Gala. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and luxury cars lined the street. Inside, chandeliers glowed above golden tables draped with roses and champagne flutes. Maya stepped into the ballroom in a deep emerald gown, elegance radiating from her every move. Her children followed closely, each exuding quiet confidence. Across the room, Bennett watched her arrival, speechless. His chest tightened, memories crashing over him like waves. He didn't know it yet, but tonight wasn't just a celebration. It was a beginning of reckoning. Sienna guided her mother to the front VIP table as guests applauded their entrance. "Mom, you look breathtaking," Ethan whispered proudly. Maya smiled faintly. "Let's just get through tonight," she replied. Across the ballroom, Bennett greeted investors with his trademark charm, but his eyes never left her. Eleanor, seated beside him, leaned in. "Don't let her distract you," she warned softly. Bennett forced a smile. "She's not distracting me," he lied, but the truth pulsed behind his calm expression. He hadn't felt alive since the day she walked away. Somewhere deep down, guilt whispered truth he was terrified to admit. The event began with an orchestra's soft melody filling the air. Waiters glided through tables, pouring champagne as cameras flashed. Maya's gaze wandered briefly toward Bennett's table, where Eleanor sat proudly like a queen guarding her throne. The years had aged her, but her eyes remained cold. Sienna noticed the tension and reached for her mother's hand under the table. "You don't have to prove anything tonight," she whispered. Maya smiled, squeezing back gently. "I know, darling. I already did." She looked around the room, her company's name on banners, her children beside her, and realized that winning didn't always require revenge. Bennett took the stage first, welcomed by roaring applause. He spoke smoothly about partnership, innovation, and legacy. His voice carried pride, but his heart trembled beneath each word. Maya watched, silent yet strong, every sentence cutting deeper. "This collaboration represents trust," Bennett declared, unaware of the irony. Noah leaned toward Ethan, whispering, "Trust, huh? Guess he forgot what that means." Ethan exhaled slowly. Tonight, he'll remember. The audience cheered, oblivious to the storm brewing at the front table. As Bennett ended his speech with a confident smile, fate itself seemed to pause, waiting for the truth to step into the spotlight next. The applause echoed to the hall as Bennett left the stage. The host stepped up and smiled brightly. "Now, we'll hear from the CEO of Collins Properties, Ms. Maya Collins." The audience clapped again. Maya stood, poised and composed, and walked toward the podium. Her children watched in awe, Every step she took was grace personified. Bennett's gaze softened as she began to speak. Her voice flowed steady and warm. "Partnerships are built on faith," she said, eyes locking with his. "And sometimes, faith must survive even when trust is lost." The word struck him like thunder. Eleanor shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Maya ended her speech gracefully, receiving a standing ovation. As she returned to her seat, Bennett rose again to thank the guests and close the evening. The audience prepared for celebration, none suspecting that destiny had reserved one final performance. Noah's pulse quickened as he exchanged glances with Ethan and Sienna. "It's time," he whispered. Ethan nodded firmly. Maya, sensing tension, frowned slightly but said nothing. When the applause faded, Noah stood from the VIP table, adjusting his suit jacket. He walked calmly toward the stage. Cameras turned instantly. Every whisper in the ballroom vanished, replaced by a silence thick with curiosity. Noah reached the podium with quiet confidence. The host stepped aside, assuming he was part of the Collins Properties team. He took the microphone, his voice deep yet calm. "Before this night ends, I have something to say." Bennett's brow furrowed, confusion flashing across his face. "Sir, I'm not sure," the host began, but Noah raised his hand gently. "This won't take long." He turned toward Bennett, his tone unwavering. "Mr. Ashford, you once believed a lie that cost a woman everything. You believed a piece of paper over her love. You believed your pride over truth. But tonight, truth speaks." Gasps filled the room. Bennett's face paled, recognition flickering, as Noah's features struck him like a mirror. Ethan stood next, walking toward the stage, his expression firm but composed. "You built towers, companies, and wealth," he said clearly, "but you couldn't build courage to ask for the truth." Sienna rose next, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She joined her brothers at the podium, voice trembling yet strong. "You didn't just lose a wife, Mr. Ashford," she said tearfully. "You lost us." The camera zoomed closer. Maya sat frozen, eyes wet with silent tears as history corrected itself publicly. The ballroom erupted with shocked murmurs as reporters began filming the scene live. Bennett stumbled back a step, shaking his head. "What are you saying?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Ethan opened the folder he'd brought. Copies of the fake DNA report and Eleanor's signed bank transactions. "This," he said, placing the documents on the podium, "is what destroyed our family." Eleanor's face turned ghostly white. Maya stood slowly, trembling but graceful. Bennett stared between the papers and their faces. "No, it can't be," he whispered, voice breaking. The truth he'd buried had risen like fire, and for the first time, he burned. Eleanor tried to stand, but her strength failed. "Bennett," she gasped, her voice trembling. "I did it for you." The crowd gasped louder. Bennett turned to her, eyes blazing. "You did it for yourself," he said, his voice cold and full of tears. He turned back to the triplets, his breath shaking. "You're my children?" Sienna nodded slowly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Bennett's knees weakened as he whispered, "My God!" The flashes from cameras captured every emotion: shame, sorrow, disbelief. Maya stood silently, her heart breaking and healing all at once. The truth, at last, had taken the microphone from lies. The gala confrontation continues. Bennett stood frozen, the walls of the ballroom closing in around him. The applause that once celebrated him had turned into stunned whispers. His heart pounded as he stared at his mother, realizing every empire he'd built stood on a foundation of lies. Maya's eyes met his, steady, unreadable. "You believe what you wanted to believe," she said quietly. Eleanor sobbed, clutching her pearls, the weight of guilt collapsing her pride. Cameras continued flashing as Bennett dropped to his knees before his children. "I didn't know," he whispered hoarsely. Noah's reply came cold but calm. "You didn't want to know, Mr. Ashford." Security escorted reporters from the hall as guests whispered among themselves. Some pitied Bennett, others pitied Maya, but everyone knew the truth had chosen its moment perfectly. Maya turned to her children. "Let's go," she said softly. They followed her out, their heads high, leaving Bennett surrounded by the wreckage of his reputation. Eleanor reached for him, but he pulled his arm away. "You took 21 years from me, he said bitterly, and gave me nothing worth keeping. She broke down completely, her cries echoing to the silent ballroom. Bennett looked toward the exit, realizing the woman he'd lost had truly won. Outside, flashes from journalists blinded them as they walked toward their car. Maya shielded her children from the crowd, maintaining composure through chaos. Sienna leaned close, whispering, "Mom, are you okay?" Maya exhaled shakily. "I'm proud of you, but truth is heavy. Carry it with grace." Her voice steadied as cameras captured her calmness. Noah, usually defiant, looked humbled. "We didn't do it for revenge," he said softly. Maya nodded, eyes glistening. "I know, but sometimes justice looks like peace." Behind them, Bennett appeared in the doorway, his figure framed by flashing lights. No longer a billionaire, just a broken man seeking redemption. That night, headlines spread across every major outlet. Billionaire Bennett Ashford exposed at gala by secret triplets. Public opinion split instantly. Some condemned him, others sympathized. His company stock fell overnight, and investors demanded answers. But in his penthouse, none of that mattered. He sat alone in darkness, holding an old photograph of himself and Maya from their wedding. "I destroyed everything real for everything fake," he whispered. The sound of his own voice haunted him. The silence in the room screamed louder than any punishment. He picked up his phone several times, but couldn't dial the one number that truly mattered. Across the city, Maya sat at her hotel balcony, unable to sleep. The moonlight reflected against the glass, casting silver across her thoughtful face. Sienna joined her quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. "You did the right thing," her daughter said softly. Maya smiled faintly. "No, sweetheart, you did." She looked at her children through the open door. Ethan asleep, Noah pacing restlessly. "The truth always finds its moment," Maya continued, her voice gentle. "But forgiveness takes time." Sienna nodded slowly, realizing that her mother's strength wasn't in her success, but in her refusal to let bitterness steal her peace again. The next morning, Bennett arrived at Maya's hotel unannounced. His clothes were unpressed, eyes weary from a sleepless night. The receptionist hesitated before calling up. Maya agreed to see him, though her heart raced. When he entered, the sight of her froze him. "You look the same," he murmured, voice cracking. "You don't," she replied evenly. He sank to his knees before her, tears falling freely. "Maya, please, tell me how to make it right." She looked down at him silently. "You can't fix 21 years, she said softly, "but you can start by meeting the children you walked away from." Maya called out gently, and the triplets stepped into the room. The air thickened with emotion. Bennett stood, trembling, his eyes darted between their faces. The reflection of himself and the woman he once loved staring back in triplicate. "Ethan," he whispered. "Noah, Sienna," his voice broke. Sienna's eyes glistened. "We're not here for apologies," she said quietly. "We're here for closure." Ethan nodded. "You can't undo the past, but you can learn from it." Bennett's tears fell harder as Noah finally spoke. "You had everything and still lost us. Don't waste what's left." Silence followed, the first honest silence between them. Over the following weeks, Bennett began trying to rebuild a relationship with his children first. He attended Ethan's tech launch, quietly supporting from the back. He sent flowers to Sienna's design presentation and later visited Noah's office unannounced, only to hear, "Trust takes more than showing up." Still, he persisted. Small gestures, steady humility. Maya watched from a distance, cautious but observant. When reporters asked her opinion, she replied simply, "The truth doesn't need revenge. It already freed us." Her dignity silenced gossip. Even Bennett's harshest critics began to see him differently. A man learning that regret only matters when it leads to redemption. Eleanor's health declined quickly after the scandal. Alone in her mansion, she replayed the moment her son turned away. Guilt consumed her nights. Regret drowned her days. One evening, Bennett visited quietly. He found her sitting by the fireplace, eyes hollow. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "Yes," he answered softly, "but I helped you, She looked at him tearfully. "Can you forgive me?" Bennett sighed deeply. "Forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me." He kissed her forehead gently before leaving. Outside, he stared at the stars, realizing the woman who had destroyed his family had finally destroyed herself with her own lies. Weeks later, Bennett stood before the unfinished Collins Towers project, Maya's latest real estate masterpiece. The structure symbolized everything she built alone. He watched construction workers hoist beams skyward, feeling both pride and pain. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Maya said, stepping beside him. He turned, words failing. "You did all this without me." She smiled faintly. "No, I did it because of you." He frowned softly. "Will you ever forgive me?" Maya's eyes glistened. "Forgiveness isn't the reward for regret. It's the proof of growth." She turned to leave. Bennett stayed, staring upward, humbled beneath the empire her pain built. Days later, Bennett's office. Bennett sat in his office, surrounded by silence, the city lights casting lonely reflections across the glass walls. The empire he'd spent decades building no longer impressed him. Papers cluttered his desk, untouched. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profits, only faces. Maya's calm voice echoed in his head, her words slicing deeper than any insult ever could. He opened a drawer and pulled out the old forged DNA report, its edges yellowed with time. His hands trembled as tears blurred the ink. "I traded love for lies," he whispered, realizing wealth meant nothing without the truth. The next morning, Bennett arrived at a private investigation firm downtown. "I need everything you can find on this," he said, handing the fake DNA report across the desk. The investigator studied it, raising a brow. "This signature," he muttered, "belongs to a doctor who was disbarred years ago for falsifying results." Bennett's stomach dropped. Hours later, the investigator returned with files, bank statements, and emails linking Eleanor to the bribe. Seeing the truth in black and white crushed him completely. His mother hadn't just lied. She'd stolen 21 years of his life. For the first time, Bennett truly hated his fortune. That evening, Bennett drove to his mother's mansion in silence. The once grand home now felt like a museum of deception. Eleanor sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes tired but sharp. "You shouldn't have come," she said coldly. Bennett dropped the folder at her feet. "You ruined my life," he said quietly. She glanced at the documents, then away. "I saved you from her manipulation." Bennett's laugh came out hollow. "You didn't save me. You killed everything good in me." Her lips trembled, but guilt had arrived too late. The only inheritance left between them was regret. Eleanor's shoulders slumped as tears finally broke through her pride. "I thought she wanted your money," she whispered weakly. "She wanted me," Bennett said firmly, "and you made sure I lost her." He turned toward the door, his heart heavy. "You have to forgive yourself," she said softly behind him. "No," he replied without turning back. "I have to live with it." He walked out, closing the door gently. Eleanor sat in silence, staring into the fire as if trying to burn away her sins. But some flames only purify after they've destroyed everything around them, and hers had already done that. Later that night, Bennett returned home and opened a blank notebook. He began writing a letter, not to Maya, but to his children. Every sentence bled with remorse. He wrote about the lies, the pain, the years he could never return. He confessed his blindness and promised to earn their forgiveness one day at a time. As he finished, he placed the letter in an envelope labeled "For my children, when they're ready." It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. For the first time, he didn't see himself as a billionaire, just a father desperate to rebuild what his pride destroyed. Meanwhile, Maya focused on expanding her company. She poured her energy into projects, but peace didn't come easily. Nights felt quieter now that truth had surfaced. The triplets were busy with work, yet she caught them often staring into space, each lost in thoughts about their father. She knew time would have to soften their hearts. One afternoon, Sienna approached her gently. "Do you still love him?" she asked. Maya looked at her daughter's curious eyes and smiled sadly. "Love doesn't disappear, Sienna," she replied softly. "It just changes shape when trust breaks. But forgiveness is what makes love grow again. Weeks later, Bennett received an invitation that stopped his breath. It was handwritten, sealed with Collins Properties' gold crest. Inside was an elegant card reading. You're invited to the grand opening of Collins Towers, Atlanta's new symbol of hope. Signed beneath were 3 names, Ethan, Noah, and Sienna Collins. Bennett stared at it, tears filling his eyes. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was an open door. He pressed the card to his chest and whispered, "Thank you." He knew Maya hadn't written it, but she had allowed it. That small act meant everything. For the first time in years, hope felt real. The grand opening drew media attention nationwide. Reporters lined the streets, praising Maya's triumph. She stood in front of the gleaming twin towers, speaking about strength, motherhood, and perseverance. "These buildings," she said proudly, "stand not just for business, but for second chances." The audience applauded as her children joined her on stage. In the crowd, Bennett stood quietly in the back, watching with misty eyes. His chest swelled with pride and pain. Maya glanced his way briefly, meeting his gaze. There was no anger, no hate, just peace. That silent acknowledgement told him more than forgiveness ever could. It told him healing had begun. After the ceremony, Bennett approached cautiously. The triplets smiled faintly when they saw him. Noah extended a hand first. "You showed up," he said quietly. Bennett nodded. "I'll keep showing up, if you'll let me." Ethan placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "We're not there yet, but maybe one day." Sienna hugged him unexpectedly, whispering, "We already forgave you. We just needed you to forgive yourself." Bennett's tears fell freely as Maya walked over. Their eyes met once more. No words, no bitterness, only understanding. It wasn't love reborn, but respect restored. That, for both of them, was enough. That night, the Collins Towers sparkled above Atlanta like 2 flames of redemption. Bennett stood alone outside, staring at the skyline that once would have been his. He didn't feel envy, only gratitude. Beside him, Maya joined quietly, arms folded. "You did well," he said softly. "No," she replied with a faint smile. "We did." They watched the lights shimmer together in silence. For the first time in 21 years, there was no anger, only peace. Maya whispered, "Karma didn't destroy, it taught." Bennett nodded, tears glistening under the city lights. And together, they finally let the past rest in the ashes of forgiveness. 1 month later, Atlanta, a month after the grand opening, Atlanta buzzed with stories of Maya Collins and her remarkable comeback. The Collins Towers had become a symbol of resilience and strength. Maya sat in her new office overlooking the skyline, sipping coffee while reviewing plans for another project. Sienna entered with a radiant smile. "Mom, the mayor's office called. They want you to speak at next month's Empowerment Summit." Maya chuckled softly. "Tell them I'll think about it." She glanced at the framed family photo on her desk. For once, all faces in the picture, hers, her children's, and even Bennett's, looked peaceful. Healing had arrived. Downstairs, Ethan supervised a marketing team, while Noah handled a meeting with potential investors. The triplets had become the true pillars of Collins Properties. Watching them grow into leaders filled Maya's heart with quiet joy. She remembered the nights she once cried herself to sleep, uncertain if they'd even have food for the next day. Now, those same children spoke confidently in boardrooms and signed million-dollar deals. As she looked out the window, the skyline sparkled like hope reborn. "You did it, Maya," she whispered to herself. "Not because you were lucky, but because pain became your teacher and faith your partner." That weekend, Bennett invited the triplets to lunch at a quiet restaurant near Piedmont Park. It was their first real family gathering since the gala. He arrived early, nervously straightening his tie as he rehearsed what to say. When the 3 walked in together, he stood quickly, eyes misting. "I didn't think you'd come," he said softly. Noah smirked. "We almost didn't." Sienna smiled gently, easing the tension. "Let's eat before he changes his mind." Laughter broke through the awkward silence. As they shared stories over lunch, Bennett realized forgiveness wasn't given. It was built, one honest conversation at a time. After lunch, they walked together through the park. Bennett listened as Ethan talked about his tech innovations. Noah shared his plans for law school, and Sienna spoke passionately about architecture. Pride filled him, mixed with guilt for missing everything. "I should have been there," he said quietly. Ethan glanced at him. "You're here now. That's what matters." For the first time in decades, Bennett laughed genuinely. As they reached the fountain, Sienna snapped a photo. "This one's for Mom," she said with a wink. Bennett smiled softly. The picture captured not perfection, but progress, and that he realized was worth more than gold. Maya smiled when her phone buzzed that evening. A photo message from Sienna. The image showed Bennett standing with her children under Atlanta's bright sky. For a moment, tears blurred her vision. The pain that once burned inside her now felt like a distant memory. She sat on her porch, listening to the night breeze. "Maybe some stories don't end in hate," she whispered. Just then, her phone rang. It was Bennett. After a pause, she answered. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked. "For raising them right." Her smile was soft. "They raised me too, Bennett. Goodbye for now." The next day, the Collins Towers hosted a charity event supporting single mothers. Maya took the stage, addressing a packed crowd of women from every walk of life. "Pain," she began, "isn't the end of your story. It's the reason your story matters." Applause erupted. She spoke about survival, faith, and rebuilding from ashes. Cameras flashed, but she spoke only from her heart. In the front row sat her children, proud beyond words. In the back stood Bennett, listening quietly. When Maya finished, their eyes met. No applause could compare to that silent exchange. It was the sound of peace finding home. Weeks passed peacefully. Bennett began mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them lessons money could never buy. His story became a reminder that even the powerful can fall and rise again through humility. Maya expanded her charity foundation, offering scholarships to single mothers returning to school. The Triplets balanced leadership and purpose with grace. Atlanta newspapers called them the family that rebuilt itself. But for Maya and Bennett, titles didn't matter. Healing had turned them into better people, not perfect ones, but human. Their scars no longer brought shame. They told a story of growth, love, and the kind of forgiveness time patiently builds. On a quiet Sunday morning, Maya visited her old neighborhood, the one where her journey began. The apartment building still stood, weathered but standing tall. She walked up the narrow staircase and smiled at the door of her first home. "We made it," she whispered. Behind her, footsteps approached. Bennett had followed silently, holding a small bouquet. "I wanted to see where your strength was born," he said gently. Maya looked at him, eyes soft but guarded. "It wasn't born here," she replied. "It was born the day I stopped waiting for you." Bennett nodded, humbled, and that's when I started waiting. The sun began to set, painting the sky in gold and amber. Maya turned toward Bennett, their silhouettes glowing against the fading light. "We can't rewrite the past," she said, "but we can honor it by not repeating it." He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Then let's honor it." They stood together in silence as children played nearby, laughter echoing through the air. Maya smiled faintly. "Life isn't about revenge or regret, Bennett. It's about lessons." He exhaled, the weight of 2 decades lifting from his chest. "And love?" he asked. She smiled warmly. "Love always finds its way home." That night, as the city lights shimmered across the Atlanta skyline, Maya sat on her balcony, reflecting on the journey that had shaped them all. The pain, the lies, the years of silence. Every chapter had led to this peace. In the distance, the Collins Towers glowed like symbols of redemption. She whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for the past, but for the strength it gave her to overcome it. Down the street, Bennett watched from his car, a small smile on his face. He didn't knock, didn't call. He simply whispered, "Thank you, Maya," and drove away under forgiving stars.